Hearing I don't love you anymore is heart shattering. I'm not speaking from theory. My wife Lola and we've been together for about more than 20 years, and we're now more than 10 years beyond a major marriage crisis serious enough to lead to a divorce petition. There was a point when we had both checked out. I thought my desire to save the marriage should count for something, and I resented the fact that it didn't. But I didn't understand yet what was. I didn't understand that the intentions, my intentions, my good intentions always, and her experience were two different, completely different things. And years later, we worked with a young lady whose relationship had become so emotionally distant that months had passed without physical intimacy. Literally, no sex. So she was trying to work on herself while facing a very practical question. Was she rebuilding something or preparing herself to lose it? In fact, research gives this problem more nuance than panic does. A national study of 3,000 married adults found that 25% had recently thought about divorce, but divorce thinking was dynamic, meaning it's back and forth. 31% of those thinking about divorce at the first measurement were no longer thinking about it 1 year later. And research also on long term relationships has found that feeling understood, valued, and responded to is associated with sexual desire, meaning desire is connected to relationship experience, not simply a switch permanently frozen in one position. So, today we're going to unpack what happens when the pain of hearing I don't love you turns into behaviors that make you feel even more rejected, and what you can do or what you can build from the side of the marriage you can actually control. So, we're going to unpack the love loss panic cycle, which is triggered by rejection, and then that leads into panic. Let's go ahead and draw that out real quick. Okay, that leads into panic, right? And that goes into proving. Proving. There you go. And that leads into performing. Let's see if I can. Okay, there you go. Performing. Let me see. Performing. All right. Just going to put this neatly here because we're going to unpack this together. That leads into performing. Let's see here. All right, my artistic hand, this is a little bit weird. Anyway, yes, performing. Okay, all right. And from performing, you get into pressuring. All right, and as you can see, this is getting worse. This is your husband feeling pressure. All right, they are starting to feel as though this is not their decision. Your behavior is pressurizing them. Okay, and sadly, when somebody feels pressure, they withdraw. It feels again like rejection all over again. This is the cycle that I want us to unpack together. Let's place this properly here. There you go. All right, good. So I'm going to use this opportunity to unleash. There's four mistakes and there's four myths. There's four mistakes and there's one myth that we have to break in this particular session today, and this is going to help you navigate this and save your marriage. Okay, my name is Ola. Anyway, with my wife Lola, we co-authored two books. Number one, Red Flag, this one, and Get My Marriage Back. You can find them anywhere, and also with the links in the description. All right, now before we dive into today's breakdown where we unpack the cycle you're looking at, if your husband has told you he doesn't love you anymore, and your marriage is actively in a crisis state right now, and you cannot afford to wait for this stream to you to figure out piece by piece, all you have to do is go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery right now and book a one-on-one discovery session with me so we can map out your exact scenario privately. Hearing "I don't love you anymore" hurts. That's the bottom line, because your mind turns one sentence into a complete future. Rejection becomes panic, and panic tells you that if you don't fix his feelings quickly, you will lose the marriage. And that is where the love loss panic cycle starts. Like I said, it's triggered by the rejection. Okay, because again, it's it's not the rejection didn't fall out of the skies. Let's not pretend, right? Things that had been happening in your marriage, either you didn't pay attention, or the other person wasn't paying attention, whatever it is. And that takes me to mistake number one. Okay, but let's talk about what you do, because it's everything you do. It's everything you do after you get hit with crisis in your face. It's everything you do after that, right? Because life happens to every single one of us, right? So he's expressing his feelings in that moment. Okay, he doesn't love you anymore. Yeah, I know you're saying, well, he's been saying that for a while, but bottom line is that feelings are, they're temporary. That's the nature of feelings, right? So the number one mistake you make is treating his feelings like an emergency. Let's put that on the board. Okay, treating his feelings like an emergency. All right, that's a mistake. Why is it a mistake? I'm going to explain. All right, so you hear those words, right? I love you. I'm not in love with you anymore, but I love you. Sometimes they might say things like, I still have love for you, right? And immediately, you want another conversation. You want another explanation. You want another chance to ask what changed, right? But a feeling you cannot control becomes dangerous when you turn it into an emergency. Because again, you might say, but what do you mean it's an emergency? It feels like an emergency. It's different from it's an emergency, right? I know what an emergency looks like. Okay. I also consult in the healthcare world, and I know what emergency looks like. And if you've gone through emergency rooms, you know what emergency look like. Somebody's telling you that they're not in love with you anymore. It's not a real life emergency. It's feelings. But here, I want to acknowledge one thing, right? Feelings they create perception, and perception is real. So I get you. I completely understand you. And like I said, I'm not speaking theory, because I've gone through this before. Okay, where somebody is telling me I need to find myself. I'm not sure, they're taking their time, and the time they're taking, it will feel like forever. So I completely get it, and we broke that down heavily in the book, Get My Marriage Back, right? And we talked about the first chapter is about stopping the bleeding, right? But it starts from all these different types of crisis, right? The book describes this kind of crisis, like, for example, I need space, I need time, I don't love you anymore. And specifically, what we warned against is fear driven begging as the response. Why are we saying that? Because I've gone through that. Okay, so it doesn't work, it only makes issues worse, right? So why? Because you go from panic, right? You go from panic into proving, right? You start to explain yourself. The problem with explaining yourself is that it always involves explaining, complaining, defensiveness, apologies. It's confusion. Okay, the person you are begging, they don't know what to do with that, and that takes me to mistake number two that you are making right now. You're trying to prove that you're worth loving. That is a problem. Trying to prove that you are worth loving. Well, you are worth loving, right? Right? Are you sure? Right? Right? If you're so sure, right, you shouldn't have to prove it. But again, I understand that's what rejection does. It breeds obsession. Rejection breeds obsession. It makes you start to beg to prove because you have panic. Okay, rejection. Let's see here. Rejection breeds. Let's see here. Breeds obsession. That's what's going on. Okay. So it's natural that you're reacting that way, but we don't, as winners in this life, we don't sit with natural. We rise above it, right? Make sense? We do better. We don't just say, hey, it is what it is. I don't change for nobody. I just do me. I just try to be myself. No, winners, they don't sit with that. They become better. Okay. So trying to prove that you're worth loving comes from you're obsessing. Okay. It doesn't mean you know what you're doing. It's just being normal. Hello, Anaya. All right. So you hear you hear those words, right, and you start making your case. You start building a case. You remind him of the years together. You explain everything you're changing. I'm talking about those that want to save their marriage. I'm not talking about anybody else. I'm talking about you find your marriage in this state, but you desperately want to save your marriage. Everybody else, I'm not talking to you, okay? So, because you've made up your mind, hopefully you've decided, right, to just leave the marriage, right? So I'm talking about those who want to save the marriage. You start reminding him of the years together. You explain everything you're changing. You try to get him to admit right there and there, in that moment, you heard that there's still something there, right? And the hidden message becomes, please look at all of this evidence and change your feelings, right? That's essentially what you're doing when you're begging, right? And unfortunately, attraction does not grow because you won an argument, because that's usually turns to an argument, right? You're just trying to prove, and like I said, you're complaining, explaining, defensive, apologizing in the same breath. That, first of all, that cannot be an authentic apology, right? They're not going to receive it as such, because you're still making a case for whatever it is you're apologizing for. Even if you don't know what you're apologizing for, it's still you are making a case for something you don't understand. You're trying to solve a problem that you haven't taken the time to find what the root is, right? You're just responding to something that made you feel heartbroken, right? Because again, anyone will be heartbroken hearing from the person you love the most, the person you're having sex with. Maybe not, but somebody you're sleeping in the same bed with, somebody you've created a family with, they're telling you that they're not in love with you. At the first instant, you're usually confused. So panic naturally, easily is the first thing that comes out. And unfortunately, in that space of neediness, of clinginess, attraction cannot grow. Attraction cannot grow when you're arguing. Attraction cannot grow when you're needy, when you're begging. So where does attraction grow? We're going to talk about that, right? But I want you to know this for now. Attraction cannot grow when you win an argument about why someone should feel attracted, right? In fact, what usually happens is that you shame them. How dare you? Like, who wakes up one day and just say they no longer want to take your advice? Because usually there's a sequence of behavior that led to that. Okay. And this was one of the painful lessons in Lola and my crisis. My intentions were not to come across as needy, but the book makes the distinction clear. We have the whole story in the book, right? Lola was receiving my behavior as needy because she had her own separate place in it where she narrated her story. I narrated mine, she narrated hers. And that experience for me, right, mattered more than the story itself, right? Because I was telling myself about my intentions. Okay, my intentions were always good, and I'm sure you trying to save the marriage right now, you might even feel like, well, you're the one that committed. You're the one that's trying to save marriage, and sometimes the resentment will come out of the place of, why is the other person not as commitment? You might even conclude that you can't save a marriage when the other person is not willing to work, when actually they are working, but you don't see it as such. You see it as they're pushing back, or they're whatever it is they're doing some kind of work, right? Because they're not just there. There's a reason why they're still there with you. There's some kind of value, weird, twisted way that they're getting from staying there and taking you for granted, and you're enabling it. You're feeding that cycle by proving, and now you're starting to perform because you're not really being yourself. Let's be honest. You're not being yourself. You really want to just express yourself, your resentment, but you're desperately trying to save the marriage. So you're performing, right? So trap number 3. Okay, mistake number 3, right? Becoming a performance instead of a person. Becoming a performance instead of a person. Okay, now I'm never telling you not to fight for your marriage. What I'm asking you to do is learn how to fight first. You need to know what problem you're trying to save first, right? You can't be answering questions that you haven't taken the time to understand. You're always going to fail doing that, right? You're going to attempt to you're performing, you're becoming extra helpful, you're trying to become a better wife, you're trying to, you've heard some people tell you on the internet that if only you have better character, and now you're wondering like what exactly is better character, because you don't steal, you don't cheat, you don't lie, you don't kill, you haven't done anything wrong, but you're like, maybe I was a little bit nasty, maybe I argued too much, maybe I was nagging too much, so you become extra agreeable. And let's be honest, that's not really who you are, but you're going to pretend, and I hate the word pretend, you're going to perform, right? So you change your appearance, you immediately wonder whether he noticed, right? You're becoming weird, right? You're like your love bomber at this point in time. Okay, you initiate affection, hoping for proof that attraction is returning, right? Even though that's not really how you move, right? But you're becoming aggressive, but you still get rejection, you still get rejected, right? You start doing wife things, you start doing it, you just going harder and harder because you're trying to earn an emotional response. Value is not a performance designed to make your husband owe you attraction. It does not work. Okay, the more your entire life becomes a presentation for him, the more rejection controls who you are, right? So you pressurize because you're performing. That's not your intentions, I get it, but you're performing, right? And they can sniff it. It's not authentic. They still want to run away. It's not authentic, not because they want to be evil. It's just the other person, even if they really want to stay with you, it's best when there's clarity that this is them making the decision and not being manipulated into that decision. So mistake number 4 is turning connection into a relationship test. You don't want this doesn't work. Turning connection, I've been warning people about this for years. Turning connection into a relationship test. You don't go and test people in a relationship. It's usually an indication that you don't trust yourself, and it's lame behavior, it's anti-seducer. Okay, it shows that you don't know what you're doing. Okay, you need to test like a machine and see if it's working, right? You're dealing with another human being. It doesn't work, it backfires. Okay, because what happens is that a good conversation becomes, does this mean he loves me again? That means you're not able to detect if a person loves you or not unless they actually say words. You're using just words, right? A peaceful evening becomes the perfect time to ask where the marriage stands. You don't know what to do with that opportunity. You rather turn it to another conversation that will help you test the relationship if it's working, right? A small movement of warmth becomes evidence you want him to explain. You want to say, like, so are you changing your mind? You don't say it in words, but your behavior shows neediness and clinginess. You're no longer experiencing the moment. You're much more focused on, you're obsessed with the past and the future at the same time, and you're missing out on the present. You're squeezing the moment for certainty about the future. And that's how you lower the quality of your life and your love life in general. I hope that makes sense, right? In fact, research on responsiveness and desire, I spoke about that earlier, right? Is useful here because it points towards the quality of relational experience, not pressure for a desired response. Right? When I say pressure, right? This pressuring, this is the heat right here. Once you enter this zone, right, this cycle is going to continue. No doubt, because what you're going to get is rejected again, and you're going to go the same route again. Because remember, going from rejection to panic does not need your effort. It doesn't need your help, right? It's automatically when you experience rejection, it breeds obsession, and you go through that route of panic, proving, performing, and then pressure, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and no one is going to feel safe around you expressing love and affection. That's not, it's not just your husband, it's in general. No one is going to feel safe in that, right? And you notice we're not talking about morals and all this type of stuff. You're supposed to do what you, human beings, when it comes down to survival, all sense of morals, they go out the window. That's a human behavior. Do you understand? Okay, so like I was saying, this research is actually explaining that the quality of your relational experience is, and when it comes to responsiveness, desire, and things like that, is about the quality of the relational experience and not pressure for a desired response. When I say pressure, I don't expect you to admit to it. It's a product of when you're moving from a place of panic and you're trying to prove and then you're performing. Is the natural next product of that, right? So responsiveness has been associated with greater desire in long-term relationships, while relational and relational is much more broader than just relationships, right? Relational and sexual well-being are also linked to feeling understood and responded to. And when somebody feeling understood, that's a process, especially when there's been damages in that relationship. And what are these damages? Like, is it your fault? No, that's not the point of this, right? The point is not for us to spell out whose fault is what, or to blame you, or to feel guilt, because all those things are all poisons, okay? And if you're a seducer, which you need to become a seducer if you haven't been intentionally one, by the way, you have been one in the past. That's how he was able to marry you in the first place. But when you're starting off, nobody know what they're doing, right? Until you fall on your face, and now you have to actually learn your power. And we're going to talk about that in a second, right? So the pressuring leads right back to rejection. And this myth, I want to share this myth with you. If it doesn't feel love right now, the marriage is already dead, right? That statement equals to marriage is dead. That's a myth, okay? One statement equals to dead marriage. It's impossible. It's impossible. What if they had been pretending all along? No, that's what losers say, okay? You're not a loser. They haven't been pretending. You're just going through life experience. And life experience have ups and downs, just like the human feelings. And here's something I want to tell you. No one cares about anything outside of their feelings. They don't care about their morals. They don't care about how they were raised. That's nonsense when they are caught up in their feelings. I'm just being honest, straight up honest with you. Why am I saying that? So you can know what you're up against, so that you can understand when we preach emotional intelligence to you, it's not just about turning off emotions like a switch. No, you don't have that capacity to do that. The only thing you can have is, number one, start from education, emotional intelligence. You start educating yourself, and you start practicing it. And when I say practicing it, what is it? Your own emotions, not the other person's emotions. Your own emotions first. You cannot properly read another person's emotions until you know, first of all, acknowledge you have emotions, and then master it. Okay, the ups and downs, and then you start practicing emotional self-control, right? Meaning, in that moment when you feel like fair enough and then destroying everything, or getting overly apologetic, or getting overly aggressive, you know how to just come back to the center, right? We're going to talk about that in a second. Okay, so it's at the end of the day, I'm telling you right now, it's current feelings. Yes, they matter. You don't dismiss it. That's not the point, okay? The point is that you also don't turn that today's emotional state into a prophecy, because that's not real. It's just emotions, okay? Well, not just, it's emotions, okay? Because emotions is powerful enough to direct the course of your life, as you can see now, right? So we've spent a lot of time educating people, both inside the book and on this life coachings, that attraction, right? Momentary feelings, right? A deeper development of mature love over a period of time, right? Fear, anxiety, all those things, right? If you don't know what you're doing, they're going to become a vicious cycle that will basically further damage attraction. Yes, it comes back down to attraction. When a person is attracted to you, they're being friends with you and they are fond of you, they generally will do their best not to hurt you because it feels good that you feel good to them. Does that make sense? So when you panic and you prove and you perform and pressure and he experiences more of the very energy is already trying to run away from, he withdraws again, and then you feel rejected again, and then the cycle convinces you that you need to try even harder, right? So it's a confusion. You think the marriage is dead, but you're trying harder. You think the marriage is dead, it's a confusion, a state of confusion because you're moving from a place of panic. So look, what I'm teaching you right now is a universal roadmap, but every marriage has their own unique hidden landmines. If your husband says he doesn't love you anymore, but he still got love for you, and maybe you want me to look directly at your specific relationship blocks, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery or the link in the description and secure one of the discovery slots available this week. Now, some of you are realizing that he doesn't love me anymore. It's not the actual, it's not the entire issue. Maybe you just discovered that. You just reminded yourself that you didn't just fall here out of the blues, right? The issue is identifying which pattern underneath all of this is destroying attraction, is destroying your marriage slowly but surely, and which part of that pattern you still have the power to change. And that's exactly what we do in the discovery session. So just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Okay. Now I've got some more to share with you today. Let's move forward. Give me another 5 minutes or so. If you cannot make your husband feel love or attraction on command, like a switch, right? What can you develop on your side that changes the experience of being married to you without turning him into a project, right? I want to unpack what we call the personal power attraction cycle. The personal power attraction cycle. The personal power cycle. Yay, that sounds good already, right? Well, it's easier said than done. It's super easier to go the panic route because guess what? This is also triggered by rejection, okay? Because this is the reward, right? This is the reward. Your job is not to manufacture your husband's feelings, okay? Your job is to stop surrendering your identity to those feelings and develop the side of the marriage you actually can control. Because again, this is still triggered by rejection. Rejection. This is red. Red as rejection, right? But instead of taking the spiral down route of panic, right? Let's see here. Let's just like to keep this. This is easy. First of all, I want you to know that going this route is easy. Okay, it's easy. Well, let's call it panic first. Let's give it its name. Call it spade a spade, right? It's easy, right? Deadly, destructive, right? Instead of going that route, right? We're going to take a different route this time. Okay, so we're not going to pretend that you don't feel rejection sometimes because of circumstances beyond your control, because you've given your identity over to things you can't control. Number one of them is the other person. The other person you cannot control. I don't know if you've tried. You probably don't know you've tried, but you probably tried, right? So instead of going that route, we're going to go the route of grounding. We have 3 core pillars here that we teach, right? We have 3 core pillars that we teach. We call it the GPS. Okay? The GPS. And this is important. This is important if you want to save your marriage. It's very important that this has to be tailored to your story, but this is it right here. If you master this, you'll save your marriage inevitably. Like it's not anything. There's no back and forth with it. Okay. Hello, Gentiana. Hello, hello. All right. So what do we have here, right? You go to grounding, right? We start where panic started, right? He says he doesn't love you, right? We don't argue with that, right? Now, you've done that before. Okay, you don't argue with he doesn't love you. Somebody stating their feelings, you don't argue with that. If you do that, if you master this, you probably won't end up in so much arguments anymore. And that becomes another problem because every solution creates new problems. But that's actually a good problem to solve when you're no longer arguing in a toxic way, right? You're able to navigate to attraction from there a lot more easier than just ending up in toxic argument all the time. But yes, every solution will create new problem, but every winner, they understand this, right? So it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal that a new solution will create no problem because you already know how to create solutions. So you just create another solution and then you create another, and then you have a good experience in life. You notice I'm saying life, not marriage, because again, people in general, they put marriage and they think marriage means it should mean perfect life. That's being delusional because the reality is that life is not perfect. So like marriage is the side of life, so it cannot be perfect. So a marriage is a function of two winners, okay, who have figured something out, right? But again, now I'm talking about a complete cycle. Oftentimes, one person has to start the cycle. So don't wait for the other person to start before you can have a good life. Like, just do yourself that favor, right? All right. So, how do you do that? You do not argue with the statement. You don't beg him to soften it because he's telling you the truth of his feelings, his truth right now, right? You don't treat it like an order to react, right? Grounding means returning to your higher self. Okay. It means gratitude. You re-engage your sense of gratitude. How do you do that? That's one of the most difficult things for human beings to do because it's easy to complain about everything that is not good, right? And what happens is that we continue to. So let me tell you. So gratitude, G stands for grounding, gratitude, and God, meaning your center, your source, right? Everybody wants to claim they're telling the truth, but what is the source of truth? What is your source of truth, right? What ideologies do you build your life around? If you don't have something like that, you can't have unconditional love because human being by itself, they don't have the capacity for unconditional love. We have expectations, and even worse, we have mismanaged expectations, which destroys marriage. When you had it together with pride, that's contempt. It destroys everything in its path. All right, so grounding is what we're talking about. You going back to your higher self. Gratitude, this is going to become your source of emotional stability. You can't stabilize yourself emotionally if you don't have a source. You don't have the capacity for it because you're an emotional being like the rest of us. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you go back to your faith, you go back to your health, something you've probably taken for granted all along. You've lost yourself in this process, right? You go back to ensuring you can sleep because heaven is not going to fall out of the skies because somebody said they're not in love with you. Like, okay, right? Now, again, it's easier said than done. This is the hard path. I acknowledge that. But this is the capacity you need to build. Now, we need to start talking about purpose, okay? Can you start? So the client I mentioned earlier on was living inside that uncertainty, right? Young lady just trying to fix her marriage. She realizes that she wasn't perfect, but she definitely knows that that nigga was not perfect. He wasn't perfect, but she's the one that's desperately trying to save the marriage. And I see this not just one time, obviously, right? But what happens is you lose yourself in that process, right? Because your emotional connection will drop, right? Physical intimacy will drop. Why? Because coming off clingy and needy is not attractive. It's not sexy. If it's not sexy, you're not going to feel sexy, and the other person doesn't want to deal with that either. It's not attractive, right? So she did not know whether her partner truly wanted to rebuild the relationship or he's just playing games. How would she know, right? When she continued to give the power over to the other side, the power that she actually has. right? What do I mean? She does have the seductive power because you got him to marry you. You can actually get him to stay married, not by controlling him. That's not what I'm saying, right? It's about finding the part of your life that you can control and staying focused on that, and stop getting drifted away into other sides that you can control. Number one being him. You cannot control another human being. The uncertainty was still there, but we're able to help her navigate this back into a place of power. Now, grounding goes to purpose. All right, we're not just going to stop there, right? Because this is a process that you need to literally follow. It takes a while. It's easier said than done. The other route is easy. Panic is easy, right? So we're going to a place of purpose. What do I mean by purpose, right? When somebody says to you that they're not in love with you, right? If you notice, even though you kind of like make a conclusion that it must be the end of the world, you keep asking the question, does your husband love you? The question is still there, right? And that question becomes the biggest question of your life, right? His mood becomes your weather. Purpose makes your life bigger than the crisis again. Your purpose is bigger than you. It's bigger than the other person, obviously, if it's bigger than you, right? It's bigger than the marriage. We're talking about your life mission. We're talking about your life purpose. We're talking about your life work. We're talking about the impact that you want to leave here long after you're gone, right? Re-engaging that, right? Start with your day-to-day work, right? But it can't stop at your day-to-day work. Now we have to think about promotion. We have to think about ascension through the ladders, whatever it is that you do, right? We have to think about what's the next 5 years look like for you in terms of your career, your life work, your life purpose. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now if this marriage wasn't a thing? You've disengaged from that because this marriage had consumed you all along. You need to re-engage that. That increases your chances of saving the marriage. Because your weird behavior has been staying in the way of actually saving and fixing the marriage, just in case you don't notice. So you have to re-engage your purpose. Okay. All right. So from purpose, now you're able to start producing some self-discovery. You start discovering yourself. Yeah. But what is wrong with people? Why can't they do self-discovery before they get into marriage? Human beings don't have that capacity. Again, these are the things you have to build. When life throws you lemons, you turn them into lemonade, right? These are the things that you're able to properly comprehend. GPS, grounding, purpose, self. Gratitude, purpose, self. God, purpose, self. Purpose is pain driven. Okay? You can't have purpose if you haven't really gone through the pain of navigating life. Life is not a bed of roses, but winners know how to turn the pain that comes from rejection. They know how to flip it into, I know I'm creating a rough graphic here, but you get the gist, right? This is the idea, guys. That same pain is what we're flipping into purpose, because purpose is almost impossible if you haven't gone through anything in life. So that experience where you feel rejected and then you're going through panic and then you're proving yourself and then you're performing and that becomes pressure and then that makes them withdraw and then that kills, attraction is getting killed. Every time you go through that cycle, attraction is getting killed over and over again. You resent each other. You resent them. You can't tell yet because rejection breeds obsession. But eventually, once you have clarity, you realize that you can't stand this person. You can, yeah. And you probably have been doing that ups and down because you resent them putting you through that, right? Why would anybody who loved you in the first place now get into a place where they're no longer in love with you, right? Regardless of what you did, the entitlement, like, you did something wrong, but you're entitled. You feel entitled. Like, I've asked for forgiveness. Can you forgive me? Just forgive me. Yeah, right. Entitlement, right? So you're mixing complaining with explaining, with defensiveness, with apologizing at the same time. Of course, that's not going to work, right? The only thing that's going to work is what I'm sharing with you right now. Go back to your source. That's called grounding. Find your footing. Go find your footing first. Go back to your source. Go back to your higher self. Go back to your God. Go back to your faith. Okay? Go back to a source so you can find emotional stability, so you can love unconditionally, because that's the only way out. People say love is not conditional, it's transactional. I'm telling you right now, you can't do marriage if you don't find a source of unconditional love. Okay, that's why you keep arguing with yourself. This talking points are not helping anybody, it's just making things worse. Okay, love in its purest form is giving, it has no condition. It becomes conditions when you start living life and you collect shiggy and then you start asking for conditions, and that's normal. You're not abnormal for having expectations. It's just about mastering and architecting what really works in the long run, because at the end of the day, go and ask people that have done it, what it comes back to is unconditional love at the end of it. But most of them will tap into a source that's higher than themselves. So self-discovery. Okay, I said most of them, all of them, all right? So self-discovery, you start discovering yourself. You discover things about you that you didn't know exist. You couldn't do that in the other route. The other route is a vicious cycle, right? The panic route is a vicious cycle that you keep losing your identity, right? You feel worse and worse because you experience rejection all over again. Uh-oh. Anyway, so self-discovery, you're discovering yourself for the first time, because now you can correlate what did that look like with where am I right now, where you feel centered and you feel happiness without waiting for the other person to make you happy. It's a brand new discovery altogether, and you couldn't have discovered this without going through what you've gone through, all right? And without taking this special brand new route you're discovering for the first time. So when you're discovering this, that enables value. Now, when all of this is happening, a lot of things is happening underneath. Okay, lots of things are happening underneath. Okay, it's happening slowly but surely. Value. This next stage is called value. Okay, value is, now we're talking self-worth. Okay, self-worth, you can see it, other people can see it. If it's only you that can see it, that's moral values, that's pride. That destroys everything in its path. Of course, you should have morals. Okay, but it becomes a problem when you think, because I have good morals and I'm better than the other person, I'm a good person. It makes you have an overbloated sense of what you deserve. Okay? What you have right now is what you deserve. It's time for you to elevate. When you're confused, it's time to learn something new. Does that make sense? So when you get into this space of value does not, it's not about I'm a good wife. You should be a good wife. Of course you should be a good wife. And this is what creates you arguing back and forth. I'm a good wife, right? Because you're not paying attention to the truth in front of you. The truth in front of you is that the marriage has been shitty, right? So you go back and forth between, is it shitty? Well, I'm a good wife. Is it shitty? Instead of you to look at what is going on, as bad as it feels or it seems, it's opportunity for you to get to a new level, right? Value in this sense means examining the experience of being around you. What are other people, especially the closest person, what did they experience being around you? I didn't say you should conclude that it's all your fault, because this has nothing to do with fault. You should just examine and assess it. What is it that they experience around you? It's a good information to have, right? Because then you know how to build from there, right? Are you grounded or constantly asking for certainty? What does that feel like on the other end? Despite your intentions, your good intentions, what does it feel like? Does it feel like pressure, or does it feel like just sitting down and taking time to assess that, right? Are you interesting to be around, right? Are you interesting because you are engaged with life, or as the marriage crisis consumed every subject, every interaction, every routine, right? Can you show warmth without turning warmth into a request for reassurance? Can you enjoy the present, this moment, right now, without obsessing over the past or the future, certainty for the future, right? So the book core direction is towards the work you control rather than the manipulative actions designed to make your spouse behave differently. You focus on the part you can control. Winners in life is about learning where their control is and learning how to use it. The first rule is that they don't have control of the other person. They have control of themselves. They have the power of influence because their behavior influences the environment, and they focus on that. And value is lived. It is not announced. If you have to announce it, yeah, I'm a good wife. If you have to announce that, at the very minimum, it sounds like you're confused. Okay, so value leads into curiosity. When you're producing value in a way that the other person can observe it, they can see it, it creates curiosity. It creates curiosity and attraction. It's the same thing. Okay, it creates curiosity. Yes, let's lit this up. Curiosity and attraction. This is where we're trying to get to. This is the work we had been doing. Alright, we could minimize this now. Okay. That creates curiosity and attraction, right? No, curiosity and attraction is not the end or be all. It just everything becomes easier from there. See, in life, it's about leverage. If you try to be a macho man and try to do everything by being a good intentional, good person, or that you're just a human being like the rest of us, right? Where you're trying to get to is where you build a system that makes everything else easier. It's called leverage, right? So, and how do you do that? You get the other person into liking you again, and you can't demand attraction, right? You don't ask whether attraction is improving. If you're doing that, it clearly is not, because it should be obvious, right? You don't start scoring the warmth and affection and messages and the sex and attention. This is an outcome of the process you have been going through: grounding, purpose, self-discovery, right? And value. This is it's an outcome of it, right? It's a byproduct of going through the process, the hard work, right? And when that happens, it's obvious. Curiosity and attraction are outcomes. Your work is creating a stronger experience from your side for you, right? Where you're no longer needy and you don't need them to be happy. When you move from a place of confidence, it's just sexy. They can't reject it. They can't help themselves, right? It's just natural, right? And why? Because you don't require immediate emotional payment, because it's like there's no pressure anymore, right? And guess what? The rest of the world, everything outside of this experience is pressure, because life is tough for everybody, and everybody just want to come home and be able to relax and not have to engage another tough conversation about something they're trying to run away from. Your job is to flip all the anxiety you're having back onto the other side. When they wonder what you're up to, attraction builds. That's the curiosity part. Attraction naturally builds. And this is also why research connecting responsiveness with desire is useful without turning it into a trick. Because I'm not asking you to trick. You can't trick this, because the process you have to go through. It's a self-development process you have to go through, right? The point is not perform responsiveness so your husband desires you. No, that's not the point. If you do that, it's fake, it will fall apart, because you haven't built enough habit anyway. The point is that attraction exists inside a relational experience and is therefore more complex than the sentence, "I don't feel it anymore." That also is the outcome of a sequence of events that led to this point in time. Okay, so then comes the capacity to test. Okay, you're going to be tested over and over again until you become stronger, and then you build trust, and then you build safety, and then you build security. Naturally, the more you go around this cycle, because again, rejection can still happen again. Rejection can still happen again, because this is the real world, right? When it happens, you now know you have experience, right? You have experience. You go through grounding. Because you can easily fall. It's easier to fall into the panic mode again. You go through grounding, and the more you're able to navigate this cycle from grounding to curiosity, the more you do that, the more you build trust, safety, and security, and the other person naturally want to be around you more, because you are the safest zone in the idea of living life for them. So the last thing they want to do is jeopardize that. Okay, the last thing they want to do is jeopardize that. All right, so if before we wrap up, right, let me leave you with this. If during today's lesson you find yourself thinking that I'm talking about your marriage, I'm probably talking about your marriage. Yes, very true. I'm probably talking about your marriage. Yes. Knowing this love loss panic cycle and navigating the personal power attraction cycle, they're all easier said than done. Well, the destructive cycle is easy. You're probably already inside of it, right? But navigating that and or breaking that cycle and getting into the personal power attraction cycle is easier said than done. For an average person, you will need skills, you need support, you need system, and that goes a long way. The three S's go a long way. Every marriage is different. Every relationship has their own history, personalities, and blind spots. Your husband saying he doesn't love you anymore may sound like a whole problem, but underneath that statement can be years of routine, pressure, resentment, attraction loss, unresolved betrayal, emotional withdrawal, communication breakdown, separation pressure, or a completely different pattern specific to your story, to your marriage. And that's why I offer a private 1 hour discovery session. We'll spend 1 hour looking at your specific situation, identifying what's actually happening in your relationship and helping you gain clarity on your next best step. So if you're ready for that, just go to getmymarriageback.com/discovery. That's getmymarriageback.com/discovery. The link is also in the description and pinned into the comment section. His current lack of romantic feeling is information, and it's good information. It's opportunity. It's not an instruction for you to panic or beg. It's okay if you've done that. Forgive yourself. Let's move forward, right? You don't restore attraction by proving that you deserve to be loved. Value has to be experienced first by you, but also by the other person. So it cannot be isolated to just you. That will become pride. Okay, you can't argue back and forth. If you have to argue it, then the value is just not there. It's just you, and you're looking to save your marriage. You have to think beyond just your selfish feelings. Okay, however, you have to see your selfish as a starting point, because you cannot pour from an empty cup, right? Giving emotional space does not require disappearing or becoming cold. That's not the you don't want to play games here, right? You do want to have game. That's different from playing games, right? It means refusing to turn every interaction into a demand for certainty. I know you crave certainty so badly, like me, like the rest of us. It's a basic human need. I get it. But personal development is not a manipulation tactic, because it's a process. And if your growth depends on him noticing it, then that's a problem. You're still giving away your power. And when rejection turns into obsession, right? And then it becomes pressure. That cycle keeps going, right? It's hard to stop, but all you have to do is stop, right? Because when rejection returns, returning to grounding rather than treating one difficult conversation or difficult day as an opportunity or a permission to panic. I'm saying a lot of words, right? The point here is you need help, okay? You need help, and it's okay to need help, because we've all been there, right? And if this session helped you understand what that statement means in the final analysis, just help me hit the like button, share, subscribe, turn up your notifications so you're notified when we go live. And if you're looking for me, you know where to find me. getmymarriageback.com/discovery. Hopefully you've been enlightened, educated. We'll see you on the next one. Take care. God bless. Peace.
Are you fighting to save a marriage or a relationship, or simply avoiding to end up in a broken or toxic one?
We've been there, and you're in the right place. You see, inside this book, right, you will find and you will discover the secret to save a broken marriage, and you will learn how to build and attract the marriage of your dream.